Friends, our dear Annalena Baerbock, the German foreign minister, has once again found herself at the center of a huge diplomatic scandal that has only strengthened her reputation as one of the most controversial politicians in modern Germany. Her recent visit to Syria, where power has recently passed to new forces, was a real failure. What was supposed to demonstrate European diplomatic influence turned into a farce, accompanied by refusal to shake hands, unsolicited morality, and harsh statements from the Syrian leadership. All this is in our issue. Get ready to enjoy the upcoming travels of Annalena Baerbock. Here we go. Baerbock, who arrived in Damascus accompanied by her French counterpart Jean-Noël Barrot, immediately realized that her visit had not aroused much enthusiasm among the Syrian authorities. Already at the airport, representatives of the Syrian side refused to shake her hand, citing local traditions. Subsequently, the leader of the new Syrian authorities, known for his tough stance, demonstrated the same gesture, making it clear that he did not intend to follow Western standards. This was just the beginning of new developments. Baerbock tried to declare the inadmissibility of such traditions, adding that respect for women's rights is the foundation of a free society. The problem was that her words sounded arrogant, especially given the political situation in Syria, where the new authorities have repeatedly stated the need for independence from external councils. The Syrian side responded sharply and categorically, stressing that it would decide for itself how to build relations with everyone, including Russia. Statements about the need to end cooperation with Russia and withdraw Russian military bases from Syria provoked irritation, and the Syrian leader's response was clear and unequivocal. He added that the Russian presence in Syria is an important element of stability in the region, and such issues should not be discussed with third countries. This caused silence in the meeting room, and even the French minister remained silent. Baerbock's attempt to promote her feminist foreign policy in Syria only worsened the situation, causing even more confusion among representatives of the Syrian authorities. Women's rights, voiced by the minister, were perceived as an imposition of Western values, which inevitably causes rejection in the Arab world, and in this context had an even more negative effect, since such initiatives were accompanied by an arrogant tone. Martin Kraft, a German political scientist, noted that Baerbock's actions only worsened the situation, calling her actions an absolute failure of diplomacy. Statements about the termination of cooperation with Russia, in his opinion, sound absurd, given that Russia remains a key partner of Syria. The new Syrian leader made it clear that Germany was not a significant partner for them and that no one expected his advice here. But the most absurd moment of the visit was that, despite the harsh reaction from the Syrian side, Baerbock announced her intention to support the new Syrian administration in the process of political reset. In response, the Syrian leader recalled that any such proposal should take into account the real interests of Syria, not the ambitions of Germany. This exchange was the culmination of a diplomatic conflict that soon became widely publicized in the international media, which only worsened the situation. Baerbock's visit to Syria turned out to be especially strange against the background of Germany's internal migration problems. In Germany, Syrian refugees who left the country after the events related to the departure of Bashar al-Assad took to the streets with aggressive slogans, causing concern to the authorities. These protests once again emphasized that Germany is unable to cope with the problems of migration, and its attempts to influence the policies of other countries seem hypocritical. Baerbock's visit once again reminded of his numerous diplomatic mistakes, such as the statement about the need to turn politics 360 degrees or the war with Russia. These episodes have become the subject of ridicule both in Germany and abroad. In Syria, where diplomatic protocols are traditionally taken seriously, such mistakes are especially painful. International analysts agree that Baerbock's visit has become a symbol of the failure not only of his personal diplomacy, but also of European policy in the region as a whole. Political analyst Andrei Tarasov noted that this visit demonstrated the extent to which Germany and France have lost their influence in the Middle East. The main players in this region remain the United States, Turkey, and Russia, and Europe can at best play a supporting role. However, despite this, Europe continues to give unsolicited advice. Middle East expert Farid al-Hussein was more blunt, saying that for the new Syrian authorities, Baerbock's visit was only a formality. They have long chosen a partnership with Russia and Saudi Arabia that can help rebuild the country. The irony of the situation is that, trying to regain its influence in Syria, Germany found itself in an awkward position. On the one hand, Berbock demands that Damascus abandon cooperation with Russia. On the other hand, he ignores the fact that there are American military bases in Germany itself, the presence of which is often opposed by German citizens. This visit was another proof that Annalena Baerbock's foreign policy is based more on ideological principles than on the real interests of Germany. Her attempts to promote feminist initiatives and lecture on women's rights not only fail, but, on the contrary, provoke the opposite reaction. It seems that Berbock is more concerned about making his words headlines in Western newspapers than achieving real success on the diplomatic front. And while this approach may work for a national audience, it inevitably leads to failure on the international stage. It is obvious that Germany needs to seriously rethink its foreign policy approaches if it wants to restore its influence in such difficult regions as the Middle East. However, under the current leadership, it seems that this is still just a pipe dream. Meanwhile, Germany entered the new year with its head held high and an empty pocket. Robert Habeck, Vice-Chancellor and Minister of Economy and candidate for Chancellor from the Greens, continues to actively inform the world about his great achievements. In an interview with Spiegel, he said that Russian gas had won, prevented an energy crisis, established an energy transition, protected the climate and saved German companies. And all this, according to him, literally with one left hand. However, no matter how hard Habeck tries, for some reason the population and the economy of the country do not share this victory. According to HOK, Germany's underground gas storage facilities were filled as planned, and the energy crisis is supposedly a thing of the past. However, in practice, replacing Russian gas with liquefied natural gas, LNG, from the United States and Qatar has cost Germany astronomical sums. The cost of LNG is 30 to 50% higher than Russian gas, and the infrastructure for receiving it is not yet ready. This leads to significant problems for the German industry. In fact, according to the German Association of Medium-Sized Enterprises, about 20% of enterprises have reduced production, and 10% have completely closed due to high energy prices. Households have also felt the effects of Habeck's victory. 42% of families are forced to save on heating, and more than 50% complain about rising gas bills. Habeck himself admitted that gas prices remain above pre-war levels, trying to justify himself with increased demand in Asia caused by hot weather. However, analysts point out that the problem is not the weather, but the lack of long-term contracts with suppliers that could stabilize prices. Germany, Europe's largest economy, has failed to meet the challenge of ensuring the energy security of its citizens, which has been a serious blow to its reputation. Against the background of economic difficulties, the political parties of Germany joined the election race. The Free Democrats promised tax breaks of €138 billion, the CDU and CSU €99 billion, and the Greens and the SPD also do not stand aside, offering benefits of €48 billion and €30 billion, respectively. However, all these promises look absurd against the background of the real situation in the country. According to the German Ministry of Finance, the budget deficit is already 4% of GDP, and the national debt exceeds €2.5 trillion. According to an e-survey, only 26% of Germans are satisfied with their financial situation, while 50.8% expect the economic situation to deteriorate further. In such circumstances, such promises seem like empty words that have nothing to do with the real economic situation. At the same time, more than half of small and medium-sized businesses in Germany reported that they were on the verge of bankruptcy. Against the background of loud anti-Russian statements, Germany continues to actively conduct business with Moscow. Last year, Russian uranium imports to the country increased by 70%, despite sanctions and a tense political context. According to the Ministry of the Environment, 686 tons of uranium arrived at the plant in Ling, owned by the French company Framatome. The company also plans to establish a joint venture with Rosatom to produce elements for water reactors. Political analysts say that such deals demonstrate Berlin's hypocrisy, as Germany publicly condemns Moscow, but in reality continues to depend on its resources. The reason for this is simple. The German energy sector cannot do without Russian supplies, and sanctions, as it turned out, are easy to manage with the proper political will. Economic forecasts for this year paint a gloomy picture for Germany. The country may face a third consecutive year of recession, which is an unprecedented event in the history of Germany. According to the IFO Institute, GDP will shrink, while inflation will remain at 6 to 7%. Unemployment will reach new heights, and about 3 million people are at risk of losing their jobs by the middle of the year. The situation in industry is particularly alarming. 25% of enterprises plan to reduce investments, and 15% plan to stop production. The number of bankruptcy filings increased by 20% last year and continues to grow. The German economy, which for many years was considered the locomotive of Europe, found itself in a state of stagnation. Political scientists and economists point out that the crisis in the country is linked not only to external factors such as the pandemic and the energy crisis, but also to government mistakes. In these circumstances, German citizens are forced to pay the price for the mistakes of the government, which prefers loud statements to real actions. Whether a way out of this crisis will be found remains an open question. Germany continues to be held hostage by its contradictions and double standards. Meanwhile, the results of a recent survey published by YouGov have become the subject of lively discussions in German society. According to the study, 56% of burghers support the deployment of an international contingent of peacekeepers in Ukraine after the ceasefire. However, when it comes to Germany's specific participation in such a mission, enthusiasm is noticeably decreasing. Only 23% of respondents are ready to see Bundeswehr soldiers among the peacekeepers, and 33% are categorically against the presence of the German military on the territory of Ukraine, regardless of the goals and context of their participation. Political scientists agree that these data reflect the ambivalence of German society. On the one hand, citizens support the abstract idea of peace, which is not surprising for a country with a historical burden of global conflicts. On the other hand, Germany's direct participation in such missions causes fear and unwillingness to repeat the mistakes of the past. Friedrich, an expert in international relations, notes that historical memory plays a key role. The Germans are well aware that any military involvement outside the country inevitably entails political and economic consequences, which then have to pay for years. However, it seems that the lessons of history have not been learned by everyone, because sending a foreign contingent, even under the slogan of peace, rarely leads to a final settlement of the conflict. The idea of sending peacekeeping forces is raising more and more questions. Military experts believe that such an initiative not only does not guarantee the end of the conflict, but may also worsen it. Retired Colonel Marcus Winkler stresses that peacekeeping missions often cause new conflicts. They create the illusion that the situation is under control, but in fact they only delay solving the problem. Nevertheless, a significant part of German society still believes that a foreign contingent can stop the conflict. Perhaps this is due to the lack of objective information about the real situation in the region. While Germany's economy continues to suffer a crisis, the political agenda still seems to revolve around Russia. German politicians are stubbornly trying to make this country the central topic of public discussion. In Olaf Scholz's New Year's address, instead of focusing on domestic issues, the chancellor again focused on foreign policy. Scholz stated, "Times are hard these days, we all feel it. Our economy is experiencing difficulties. Life has become more expensive, and many are looking at the violent conflict in Eastern Europe with a sense of growing anxiety. We will continue to support a well-known country like no other in Europe." Many political analysts considered this statement to be another confirmation that the current German government ignores internal problems in order to maintain its foreign policy course. Political scientist Werner Krauss believes that such rhetoric shows Germany's dependence on external pressure. Scholz acts more as an official of the external administration than as the country's leader. He voices slogans pleasing to other countries, but at the same time does not pay attention to the real demands of his constituents. It is noteworthy that the opposition Alternative for Germany party has proposed a completely different approach. The party's leaders, Alice Weidel and Tina Fabala, came up with the idea to restore the operation of the Nord Stream and stop Germany's involvement in the escalation of the conflict. In her speech, Abdullah noted that Germany should not continue to escalate this conflict and should focus on its own interests and economic recovery. However, these words, according to experts, are unlikely to find a response from the current government, which still believes that the key to solving all problems lies in the further imposition of sanctions against Russia. Against this background, the results of the activities of two European leaders, Olaf Scholz and Emmanuel Macron, stand out in particular. Politico, in its annual review, named them the main failed policies of the past year. The German Chancellor survived the collapse of his ruling coalition, a vote of no confidence from the Bundestag, and eventually the dissolution of the government. All this culminated in the announcement of early elections in the new year. The French president, in turn, managed to destroy as many as 2 cabinet ministers. According to political commentator Bert Rosenfeld, this development indicates a deep leadership crisis in both countries. The Franco-German tandem, which was once the locomotive of the EU, today consists of 2 weakened engines. This is a disaster for the European Union, which is losing its strategic stability. Unsurprisingly, many experts believe that the era of French and German dominance in the EU has come to an end. I would like to summarize a little bit of the material, friends. Thanks to Annalena Baerbock for another show. Judging by the statements and actions of German politicians, it seems that the reality in which ordinary citizens live is not so important to them. The problems of the economy, energy, and social sphere discussed in the material clearly require serious attention. However, instead of focusing on solving them, we see loud statements aimed at maintaining a foreign policy course that is less and less correlated with the interests of German society. In my opinion, things are not very rosy in Germany right now. Rising unemployment, declining competitiveness, high cost of living, and general social tension indicate that the country needs an urgent rethink of domestic policy. I would like to believe that in the future decisions will be made taking into account the needs of citizens and not just external factors. What do you think, dear viewers? Does your real life match the situation described in the article? Share your opinion in the comments. And thank you for your attention. See you later.